My name is Helena Brantley, and on behalf of the Bay Area Book Festival, I want to welcome you and thank you for coming. Whether you're here because you're reading How to Be Here, or you want to read it, maybe you enjoyed seeing Rob Bell talk with Oprah, maybe that's what put it on your radar. Or if you're like me, you've enjoyed these friendly and life-affirming exchanges with Liz Gilbert on her Big Magic podcast. Whatever it is that brought you here today, we're happy that you're here. It's an honor to have Rob Bell. As you know, he is in high demand. I love what Agatha French, the LA Times reporter, who tweeted about the privilege of talking in this room, wrote. Rob Bell, she said, seems constitutionally incapable of being limited to one vocation. Lucky us. Rob is a husband and a father. He's a podcaster, best-selling author, performer, surfer, filmmaker, and as I understand it, he's also a pastor. So we thank you, Rob Bell. We thank his publisher, HarperOne, and we thank all of you for coming and learning how to be here. Help me welcome Rob Bell.
I walked in this room and immediately had flashbacks to 25 years ago and the final that I didn't study for. Did anybody have that when you came in? You were like, there's something I was supposed to have done that I haven't done. And it's about to be exposed. Welcome. I guess I'm not from here and you are, so I don't know why I'm welcoming you, but it just felt like the right thing. Are you all from Berkeley? Oakland? Oh, that's a big deal if you're from Oakland, not Berkeley. Oh, it's not a big deal. Okay. Where else are you from? Stockton, San Francisco. Where?
Yuba City.
Yuba City?
Yes.
Where's that?
Above Sacramento.
Above Sacramento. Chico.
Sacramento.
Colorado. If you all say it at the same time, it's much easier. Because well, it's great. And when you say yes to being at a book festival, which is a lot different than a book fair, you don't know where you're going to be talking or what it's going to be like, and then you show up here with all of you. But I was like, oh, we'll see what it's like. And then they were so excited, and they said that I think you'll have a great time with those people for the 4 hours you have together. So, and if you're wondering if that's a joke, you'll find out. So I was thinking I would talk for a bit about how I got into this and about writing and so this new book, How to Be Here. And then I'm always interested in what you want to talk about. So how about I talk for a bit, and then there's always somebody who has a question. They don't hear a word you say until they get to ask their question. And then we'll get to those folks and hopefully, bring them the piece they need. And then from there, we'll talk about some other things. And then I'll be happy, I'll stick around afterwards if you're the type who want a photo or a book or all whatever that is. Does that sound good? Yeah. And my daughter and my wife came with me, which was fantastic. And just when we got down here, and I was like, so you're going to listen to Dad talk? And she looks at me like, are you serious? My daughter is 7, so she is already somewhere else. Because I said there are kids' books somewhere as a part of this. That's how I actually got her on the plane, was, will you come to me, you might get some books out of this. And she said yes. So listening to me is not at all interesting to her, but books somewhere. So I was in a band in college, and the band broke up, like college bands do, because everybody had to get jobs. A fairly standard arc. And I was teaching water skiing in northern Wisconsin like you do, and there was this camp, there was like a Sunday morning religious service, and I was part of the waterfront staff, and it was our turn to run the Sunday morning religious service, and I remember somebody said, well, who will give the sermon? And I said, I will. Have you ever said something, and as the words are coming out, you realize they're now floating in the ether, and you cannot bring them back? And so I was like, okay, apparently I'm going to give a sermon. I was 21. This was the summer of 1992. And the sermon for me had always raised the existential question, what's for lunch? You with me on that? For me, the sermon, I'd always understood the sermon is how you convince people to give money to build bigger buildings. It's called an edifice complex. Or some of you will get that later. It's very clever. And then sometimes I had seen a sermon, but the sermon was basically the belief affirmation device. It just told people what they already know to convince them that they're right and everybody else isn't. And you just keep repeating the same things and everybody feels good about how right we are. And sometimes I noticed the sermon was at some level how you get people to vote a certain way. But I stumbled into the sermon and was like, wait. So I got up to give this sermon. And I remember taking off my sandals. I was wearing Birkenstocks. I took off my sandals because I became aware that the ground was holy and that my life was never going to be the same again. Some sense of this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're here to do. Followed quickly by, you could be terrible at this. But it would get you out of bed in the morning. There was some sense, like even if I was horrible at this, I could give myself, this would be fun. And there was a sense of taking off my sandals. By the way, Moses does not take off his sandals because suddenly the ground is holy. He takes off his sandals because he realizes the ground has been holy the whole time, and he's just now becoming aware of it. The deal isn't necessarily being right or wrong, or whether or not you believe the right stuff or have your intellectual furniture arranged properly. It's probably more about seeing that which has been here the whole time. You're just now waking up to it. And I gave the sermon. I remember the opening story of the sermon was about a kid who was hung by his underwear from a branch in a tree by his camp counselor. So it was a significant theological reflection right out of the gate. And I give the sermon, and so I sort of stumbled into this. And I realized as I did more of these sermons that the sermon was an art form, and that I lived in a culture that had in many ways lost this sense of the sermon as an art form. If you saw Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, nobody afterwards was like, he told better stories last week. Right? Nobody was like, I think he went a bit long. No, you were either there or you weren't. It was an experience. It was dangerous, confrontational, healing, comforting, soothing, provocative, subversive. It was all of these things. It was an experience that you were caught up in. You were invited to see things in a whole new way. It disturbed the comfortable and comforted the disturbed. And I had this sense that I was working with like an actual art form, that it was somewhere between guerrilla theater and performance art and a TED Talk and a revival and a recovery meeting. Somewhere in there. And so I began to work with this and try in all different ways. And I noticed something would happen right away. I gave one of my first sermons, and it was not pretty, but a woman comes up afterwards and she says, "Thank you. I feel like I'm finally at peace with my mother's death." And I'm thinking, oh, that's so powerful. Wait, that was a sermon about generosity. It had nothing her response had nothing to do with what I was talking about. Why do I even prepare? But then there was this, oh, wait, this particular art form creates space, and things happen in that space. There's this ancient story about this master teacher who would meet with his disciples on Sabbath Eve, Friday evening, and they would study and debate and interact together. And one night, all of the disciples are walking home, and the one says to the others, "I'm so sorry, clearly the teacher spoke with me the whole evening." Second one says, "No, the rabbi and I are the ones who conversed the whole evening." Third one says, "You're all crazy. I think it was clear to everybody present that the rabbi and I spoke, and it is I who should be apologizing to all of you." And at that moment, all the students fell silent because they realized what had happened. And the ancient commentary is, so it is with the divine. Each person swears Spirit was speaking to just them. Anybody ever been in a crowd hearing something spoken and partway through you were like, has this person been reading my mail? And you heard whatever it is that you need to hear, and it was 3 minutes in, so you just hung out the rest of the time, but you had heard the thing that you needed to hear. And so I just kept working with this. What's possible with this? Where can it be taken? What does it look like to announce good news in this? And eventually we started a church when we were 28, like you do. And then I had an idea. I had noticed that certain ideas had a particular resonance to them. That when I would do that section or that bit, that I had a particular energy to it. And over time, a bunch of these different ideas, I thought maybe that's a book. But I'd never written a book. And so I said to a friend of mine, I got this idea, I think it might be a book. And he said, well, come to my office. I have a whiteboard that's the whole wall of one of my office walls is a whiteboard. Why don't you outline the book? So I go to his office and I outline all of the ideas for this book, and then he had these office chairs on wheels, and so we would like sit along the wall and then we would wheel back and forth and discuss the different parts of this outline. And then I was like, this is a book. I need to write this book. But I had a job at the time. I was a pastor doing pastor things. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I knew that a courtroom had a stenographer that records everything that's said. I thought, I'll hire a stenographer. And I will stand and in a room, I'll just pace back and forth and speak the book. And at the end of the day, I'll be an author. I was like, I found a way around it. At the end of the day, I'll have a book and I'll be an author. So I hire Kevin, the stenographer, and somebody let us use this office room. And we spend a day in this office with me. This is 2004, with me like speaking this great grand book that I'm so excited about. And I remember distinctly after lunch, middle of the afternoon, it's like 2:37, and I'm talking away, and suddenly I realize that I'm actually thinking about something else. I have managed to bore myself. I'm not even listening to me. Oh, I remember thinking, this can't be that good if I've already tuned out, and I'm the one who's making the book. A couple days later, Kevin, the stenographer, sends me this transcript of everything that I'd said, and I start reading it, and it's just so bad. It's like a mild form of torture. It's like me, but not me. And I realize, oh, some of you will think this is very insightful and brilliant. I realize if I'm going to write a book, I have to actually write it. Yes, this is Berkeley. You're right with me. I'm sorry, in whatever, or Oakland, or whatever. Yeah, you're right with me. Stockton. Yeah, I'm actually going to have to write a book. So I remember opening up a word processing document, like a blank document, and think, okay, all right, I'm going to write this. And in the upper left-hand corner is that line that like blinks. And I remember just sitting down, and as soon as I look at that blank thing, I start thinking about all the authors that I adore. I was like, oh, like we're going to do that. I started thinking, are there any Frederick Buechner fans here? The ABC, sibilants, yes. I was thinking, that guy does that. Any Anne Lamott fans? Yeah, we're like in her backyard, are we not? Yes. Oh, yeah, Anne Lamott, or Dave Eggers. Look at me now, just pandering to the local writers, because I actually love Dave Eggers. Nick Hornby, Dorothy Sayers has this book on Trinitarian creativity. This guy, David Gregory, wrote a 900-page novel called Shantaram. Good Lord. Oh. Yes, please repeat after me. Have you read Shantaram? What do we even say about Shantaram? It's awesome. Yeah, that's why you came to this festival, to hear her say that book is awesome. Shantaram. I started thinking about the stuff I've read that I was like, have you ever read something and you thought a human being made this? Like what is in a human being's mind? Is it Poisonwood Bible where the one character speaks in palindromes? Did anybody read that and think a human being came up with this? So I'm sitting there thinking about all the actual writers and authors I know, and I'm looking at this blinking line. It's like the line is blinking, but it's also like taunting. Like, you want a piece of me? Like, you're going to do something with me? There's a reason why they call it a cursor. Right? Because it like calls out every little bit of fear or insecurity, any bit of doubt. Anything you've ever seen somebody do and you thought, I could never do that, it's all there in the blinking line, which is basically, who are you to do this? We all, at some level, have a blinking line. The blinking line is whatever is waiting for you to bring it into existence. So it's a book, could be a project, a mission, a task, a nonprofit, a business, a family, a child, a job, a new class, a new design. The blinking line, your life, the blinking line is whatever is waiting for you to bring it in to existence. We create our lives. We shape them, we mold them, we form them, we tweak them here and there. We create our lives. Now, for many people, the fundamental way they view their life is not we create our lives. The fundamental way they view the world is finished. And so the world is finished, it's established, it's fixed, its boundaries are in place. And so what you do is you in your life try to go out into the world and find your place somewhere in it. But in the ancient Jewish consciousness, the world is unfinished. And so what you do and what I do is we take part in the ongoing creation of the world. So you are creating your life. You even find the mystics talking about how God is looking for partners to take part in the co-creation of the world. You create your life. Now, whenever you start talking about creating your life, there's always an accountant that's like, you mean like creativity? That's not me. Or there's often a mom who's like, that's nice, but I'm just a mom. So first, let's talk about accountants. Because when you talk about creating the world, there's always the accountant, the CPA, somebody who works in accounts receivable, who's like, oh, that's for creative people. I was once speaking at a creativity conference, which was titled that, which I thought was interesting. And it was a creativity conference called Creativity Conference. And so there was a speaker before me, and so I thought I should go sit in the audience for the speaker before me, because you don't want them to say something and you don't want to get up and not be aware of something that's happening in the room. So I thought, I'll sit in the crowd and listen to the speaker before me, just to make sure, to see what it's like, pick up the groove. Speaker before me gets up, and he says, I have one central thesis, and my central thesis is that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are math people and art people, numbers people and creative people. And he says, I'm a math person. Math people aren't very interesting. We tend to be kind of boring, and we tend to, good Lord, I'm already bored. And then he says, my wife is an art person. She's creative, she's expressive, she's funny, she enjoys life, she has a flourish. I'm more of a numbers math person. There are two kinds of people in the world. And I'm listening thinking, well, this is interesting. My talk is the exact opposite. Like, do I get up when it's time for my talk and say, hi, I'm Rob? The guy before me, totally full of shit. Anyway, what I was going to say was this idea. Here's why. If you bring order, structure, or coherence to things, that is participating in the ongoing creation of the world. What you do with your time, how you set up your home, where you go, what you give your sacred energies to is all fundamentally creative work. I do speaking tours, and when you're doing a tour, and there's only a couple ways to get around the country or get around the world, so oftentimes you'll be doing a series of cities, and you'll be a couple of cities behind somebody else. So one time in Denver, we couldn't get into the green room at the time they had said, because Kid Rock had been there the night before. And they're like, we're going to have to bump back the load in because Kid Rock was here and destroyed the green room. So we're going to have to rebuild it. So sometimes you're a couple of cities behind. One time in Detroit, I was like, well, who's been here recently? To the house manager. He's like, you know what, the other night there was a very talented young woman here. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I think she might do something. I was like, why? He said, well, she was just really good. What was her name? It was a Gog, Lady something. I was like, Lady Gaga? He's like, yeah, Lady Gaga. Or so you're often a couple of cities behind. One tour, I was a couple of cities behind the White Stripes. Are there any White Stripes fans here? So this is back when we didn't know whether they were still married. And so some of you enjoyed that joke. That's beautiful. So this was Jack White, Mag White, and what was interesting is I said, tell me about the white stripes, because I'm always fascinated in how people set up their lives, how they organize things, and he says, well, you'd find this really interesting. He said, you know who Jack White travels with? I was like, who does Jack White travel with? He says, a full-time accountant. And he says, the accountant is awesome, like on every last penny. So during the settle up, the accountant is going through every last line item. And what's fascinating to me is when you think about this musician, Jack White, in culture, he's the ultimate artist who's just following the muse. Would you agree? This sort of like, I'm just feeling it. Apparently, a recent tour, he had an all-male and an all-female band, 2 different bands, and then right before he'd go on stage, he'd decide which band he was going to take out on stage with him. So this is the ultimate. Now, if you go to one of his shows in Nashville at his studio, the show gets recorded, and when you walk out, they hand you a fresh-pressed vinyl record of the show you were just at. So there's this like, wow, he's doing stuff no one's ever done before, just following the spirit, the muse here. And it's fascinating because you see him and there's this sense of like, just going where it takes me. Yes, you are, but down the hall is a dude in a sweater vest. You know what I mean? With horn-rimmed glasses, and his name is Earl, and he got a master's from Cornell in business management. Are you with me? This thing that appears like it's just floating along, somebody somewhere is making sure that the numbers line up. Have you ever visited anybody in a third world setting who they gave it all up to help the poor? And they left behind all that Western materialism to go identify with the least of these. And then you go visit them and you're like, I cannot wait to see what it's like when somebody renounces everything in order to help those who need it the most. And you visit them, and what are they talking about? The truck wasn't here at 8, and I'm pretty pissed at Cliff, right? I don't know who Cliff is, but I think he drives the truck. Anybody ever seen somebody doing something that appears very romantic and sexy and amazing, but when you go visit them, they're talking about spreadsheets and numbers and delivery times and accounts receivable? Anybody know what I'm talking about? This sense of like, oh, that thing that appears like you just follow your heart. Somewhere, somebody was bringing it order and coherence. That's all fundamentally creative work. What you do with your time, what you do with your energy, how you bring order to things. It turns out that if you don't stick to the budget, you can't keep doing that thing. So actually sticking to the budget is integral and necessary for whatever the creative thing is that's being done. We create our lives. We shape them, we alter them, we form them. And then sometimes I'll meet moms who are like, oh, okay, it's nice creating your life, but have you seen laundry stats like I have to do? By the way, have you noticed the correlation between laundry and your inbox? Just the moment when you get the laundry done, all of it, right? Everything's put away. You even put away the drying racks. You haven't left them out because you're that on top of your game. Everything is folded nice and neatly in all the places. That's the moment your kid walks through the front door and they're like, a sewage pipe broke down the street. And the exact moment, what have you been playing in wet cement? It's like your inbox. The moment you emptied it. Remember that day recently when you were like, I'm going to empty my inbox? Come on now. And you were like, 3 to go. And by the end, when people were like, can you be there next Wednesday? You were just like, yeah. And just gone. Because you're like, I got 3 to go. Sure, whatever it is. And then you had 2 left, and then you had 1 left. And then you hit send, and there was that moment when there was nothing in your inbox. And how did you feel? And so what you did, what did you do? You closed your eyes. You leaned back in your chair, and you went, yes! And then you leaned back down, and you opened your eyes. And there in the inbox, one of the people who you'd sent an email to, they were at their desk going, I'm emptying my inbox. Right? And they got one from you, and they pushed that thing back so fast. And now it's just back and forth. There's a deep, that sense. By the way, a friend of mine named Carlton Hughes, he makes TV shows. He made the show Lost. He's like amazing. The other day, he has insights. Do you have a friend who's so smart, they can make throwaway insights that you could build a career on? The other day he says to me, he's like, by the way, have you noticed how the zombie genre is making a comeback? And he said, like shows The Walking Dead. Have you noticed that the zombie genre has made a comeback along with the birth of email? Because no matter how hard you whack them down, they just keep coming. Some of you will get that on the ride home. It's good. Trust me, it's good. So sometimes you'll meet the accountant, you'll meet the mom who's like, okay, that's nice, right, yeah, great, creating your life. But you'll understand, I'm just a mom. One thought about moms. Is there anything that is a more direct participation in the ongoing creation of the world than bringing new peoples into it? And then nurturing and protecting and guiding and caring and then launching that rocket known as a child. Could anything be more fundamentally creative work? How you set up a home, how you guide the day is all deeply, fundamentally, organically creative life. So whatever you are doing, you are creating a life. And you are the steward of your energies. So you were given a couple years on this floating ball of debris hurtling through space at 67,000 miles an hour. That was a reference to Earth. You were given a bit of time here. And you were given energy to do something. And you are the steward of those energies. How will you spend those energies? This is why angry comments on YouTube videos annoy you, but they also at some level spiritually disturb you. The hate on the internet that people consistently speak of. The reason why it's so disturbing is it's not even, to call it hate on the internet is the most shallow level. This is about an issue of what will you do with your energies. And in a world with the kind of problems and injustice and human trafficking and starvation and people with not access to clean water and educational systems that aren't serving kids like they should, in a world with these kind of issues, somebody who woke up in the morning and the best thing they can think of to do with these sacred energies they have is to slam somebody else. This is somebody in deep despair about the use of their own energies. Are you with me on that? Yeah. That's why it disturbs you at an energetic, spiritual level, is because it's somebody revealing what they actually think about the worth of their energies. Yeah. Oh, by the way, boredom is a spiritual disease. Boredom says there's nothing new to create here. Cynicism is a spiritual disease that says, what's the point of anything that you make? Oftentimes the cynic presents themselves as wise, but generally cynicism comes from a wound. So the person presents themselves as, oh, that's lame, that's going to burn out, that's no good. The cynic presents themselves as somebody who has seen the world and just understands all that's totally lame, don't even bother. Oftentimes the cynic is somebody who tried to do something and it blew up and it hurt. And if you hold something at a distance, then it's harder for it to break your heart. And so if you keep the world at a distance and you poke it and prod it, which is why cynicism can be so funny, because it has an edge to it, but oftentimes that edge comes from the wound. I got burned. I discovered there are snipers on every roof. There were critics. It didn't go well. We lost money. And so if I keep it at a distance, then it can't crush my heart. Boredom is a spiritual disease. It says there's nothing interesting to create here. Cynicism says there's nothing new to create. And despair is the spiritual disease of believing that nothing you create actually matters. So despair is, what's the point of it anyway? And all of these come from how you respond to this blinking line, which is your life. And we create our lives, and we shape them, and we form them, and we do something with them. Now, when you talk about creating your life, there's always the person who's like, yeah, but you don't understand what's come my way. Like the stuff that's come my way that I never would have wished on my worst enemy, and yet it came my way. And What is that? How do you even do anything about that? And I was actually wrestling with this question when I was working on this book and realized that I was a direct recipient of the answer to this question. When I was growing up, my dad was super dad. My dad coached teams we played on of sports he'd never played. He would like read a book and then coach and be like, run that way. He was like super dad. And he used to stand at night when he'd say goodnight to us, he'd stand in the doorway, and right before he turned the light off to my room, he would say, "You're my pride and joy." And then he'd turn the light off. And I found myself saying that to my kids recently, like, "You're my pride and joy," and thinking, where did I get that? I'm turning into my dad, but in a good sense. And he was present. He took us on vacation. He was just like there, like so present. When I was in college, he would write me handwritten letters with an actual fountain pen on this really thick cardstock. I remember like the feel of the paper. Every week when I was in college, like, "I got your back. I'm cheering you on. Here's what happened this week. How are you doing?" And I would just stack these letters, which were like my dad going, "I love you. I'm with you." Now the reason why I tell you that is when my dad was 8, his uncle picked him up at his house, and he's like, "Where are we going?" And he gets in the back seat of the car, and his cousin is sitting next to him. He's like, "Where are we going?" His cousin said, "Don't you know? We're going to the funeral home. Your dad died." And his dad had cancer, and no one had told him. And his dad dies at the age of 34. So he's 8, his brother is 6, and it's them and their mom. When he's 15, his mom leaves the house one day and doesn't come back. And the relatives tell him that she's sick and she's going to be gone for a while. And I should back up. When he gets to the funeral home and he's told, "Your dad died," he's told, "We will not cry because that would be challenging the sovereignty of God. Your dad is in heaven. We're happy about that." There's a therapist somewhere that was like, "Cha-ching." So then when he's 15, it's him and his brother, and his mom disappears one night, and all they're told is that she's very, very sick. And the story that he told me is that that night, his 13-year-old brother clung to him all through the night, repeating, "Are we going to be all alone in the world? Are we going to be all alone in the world?" And then a couple of days later, she shows up, and she's okay, and whatever it was, she had survived it, and then life just went on. And that's all he remembers about, no explanation, no. And then when he was a junior in high school, his freshman brother was in one of those freak, inexplicable accidents and was killed. And so it was just him. So he gets into a college 4 hours away. His uncles take him on the first day of college. They drop him off on the back of his dorm, put his 2 bags on the sidewalk. They shake his hand and say, "Well, we hope it goes well," and they get in the car and drive off. And it's just him. Somewhere in all of that unimaginable pain and loss, he decided, someday I'm going to have a family, and I'm going to be the dad that I never had. Who starts cancer foundations? If you go to the website of the Cancer Foundation, you go to the About section, drop down how it started, it's always, always, always somebody who says, "This Cancer Foundation was started because I lost my fill in the blank of loved ones," correct? It's somebody who had something traumatic, heartbreaking, painful happen to them, and through the tears and the loss and the grief and all that you have to lament, something within them said, "I'm going to create something out of even this." So oftentimes when you talk about creating life, there's somebody who's like, "Yeah, but you don't understand this thing that happened to me." And perhaps the ultimate judo move is to say, yes, that was heartbreaking, awful, unjust, tragic. But once we've properly grieved, once we've given expression to all that pain, there's always the chance that that question will begin to arise. What could be created out of even this? I was on tour last summer, and I was talking to a woman after one of the events in the meet and greet line, and she walks right up to me and she says, "I haven't been out of the house in a long time," which is not a bad opener. Like that's basically like a "please ask me why." So I haven't been out of the house in a long time. So I said, why? She said, I've sort of been checked out of my own life. She said, because my son is in prison for the thing that society looks down on the most. And I was like, I assume it's something sexual and children. Would that be your probably first guess? Something along those lines. And she said, the shame and the humiliation is so intense that I've essentially just checked out of life. So, but I'm here tonight. And so I said to her, are there other people in prison for the thing that your son is in prison for? Yeah, I guess so. Do those other people who are in prison for the thing that your son is in prison for have moms? I guess. Do you cook? She looks at me like, where is this going? It's like, do you cook? She's like, yeah. It's like, do you have a house? Yeah. What if you invited all those moms to your house and made them a meal and just told them what your experience has been like? What could happen? Could you do that? And there was this look on her face like, yeah, I think I could do that. All right, then let's try that. Whatever has happened to you, what could be created out of even this? So we all have a blinking line. The blinking line is the thing that is waiting to be brought into existence through us. And that blinking line, it doesn't just stand there blinking. Sometimes it taunts, right? It taunts you. Like, who are you to do this? Who are you to do this? You know you're making progress when you start talking to the blinking line. Who am I to do this? And the question the blinking line doesn't know what to do with, the blinking line just shuts up the moment you just say the blinking line, who am I not to do this? Who am I not to do this? 2 thoughts, and then let's do some questions. First thought, who you aren't isn't interesting when it comes to you doing something with your blinking line. A lot of people have a list of things they aren't, generally involving a blank and then enough. Smart, talented, educated, resourced, wealthy, thin, pretty, networked, enough. And so for many people, there's an internal dialogue. Whenever it comes to the blinking line is like, what are you going to do with me? It's like, well, so-and-so's smarter, and so-and-so's faster, and so-and-so. You know you're making progress when you realize that who you aren't isn't interesting. I'm not very good with math. If I see too many numbers on a spreadsheet, my eyes just glaze over. See? It's so boring. You making long lists of all the things that you aren't, I'm already bored. And your friends are bored, and the people around you who've heard those lists are bored, and actually at some level you're bored. It's not interesting. It's not interesting. Who you aren't isn't interesting when it comes to you and your blinking line. And then who they are isn't interesting. And we all have our they, right? Everybody has a brother-in-law named Phil. Or a sister who got really good grades and didn't seem to be trying. Or the woman down the street who has like 9 kids and always looks fabulous. Or the person who just skated all the way to the top of the company. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's the person who just appears to be like, this isn't very hard. What's your problem? Not interesting. It's just not interesting. You have your path. They have theirs. There's this great story. Started out as a preacher. There's this great Jesus story, post-resurrection. And by the way, the post-resurrection Jesus, you know the one who that first line rises from the dead, and then he says to his disciples, you know that profound line he says to them, do you guys have anything to eat? Because rising from the dead, you work up an incredible appetite. I mean, you all know that. Or the Gospel of John, the story about Jesus rising from the dead, and his closest disciples don't recognize him. And you know what that's like. When you resurrected and your friends didn't recognize you, it's so frustrating. But this one account, he meets some of his disciples, and he's interacting with Peter. And Peter's sort of the caffeinated one. And Peter's the one who's denied him 3 times. So there's this fascinating exchange where Jesus is like, do you love me? Do you love me? And it's like Peter's like, yes, I love you, boss. Somehow Peter's from Boston. And the second time, do you love me? And he asks him a 3rd time. And you know that Peter's like, this is why you're asking me 3 times if I love you. And then all of a sudden, you know there's some moment when Peter's like, oh. Because he's caffeinated but a little slow, like, oh. And he says, now I want you to feed my sheep, which was like the lowest of tasks in some ways. Like, are you ready to like actually roll up your sleeves and do something interesting? And there's this great moment of like reconciliation and peace between them. Like, okay, feed my sheep. And Peter's response to this is, what about him? And he looks over at John, his rival. Because earlier John had been like, Peter and I were running to the tomb, but I got there fast. It's like there's a dawning of a new creation, but I can run faster. So there's like this rivalry between them, but in this moment, when he's like, oh, there's this beautiful, I got something I want you to do. His first thought is, yeah, but what about him? And Jesus has this great line, which for me is like a life mantra. Jesus' line is, what is that to you? I think he also did this. It feels right, does it not? Like you'd be like, what is that to you? What is that to you? She's got that, what is that to you? He's always doing this, they, what is that to you? You have your path. There was always somebody smarter. There was always, for me, somebody more popular. There was always somebody who knew what to say. There was always somebody who got better grades. There was always somebody who's a better musician. There was always a better athlete. There was always somebody better. But there's this moment when you realize you can just throw yourself into it, whatever it is. You can just throw yourself into it. And you can stop looking over your fence or over your shoulder and making lists of all the things that you aren't or all the things that they are. Part of it is you make a decision not to compare what you do know about yourself with what you don't know about them. I remember talking to a billionaire whose daughter had an eating disorder, and he was going to a treatment center where she was for the first parent weekend. I was like, wow, you can have $1 billion, but if your daughter is hurting, you're just a dad with a daughter who's hurting. Yeah, you have no idea what other people are going through. So you stop comparing what you don't know about them with what you do know about yourself. We create our lives. We do something with them. We have this sacred energy. What will we do with it? So there's a few thoughts. You want to talk about something else? I can keep going. We can talk about questions. I can tell you the sheriff story. Whatever you want to do. Okay, one of my first sermons ever. Sheriff story, /failure. One of my first sermons ever. I just starting out as a pastor, and I had been helping this single mom who was trying to get custody of her kid. And I had been interacting with them, and she had said, will you come witness in court, testify that I'm a good mom? I was like, sure. So I put on my suit, I go downtown, and I testify in court that I interacted with this family, and I think the mom appears to be a great mom. And when they asked me to testify, you go up into this little witness box, and then this bailiff comes over. His name was Rusty, incidentally enough. And they take the Bible, and you have to put your hand on the Bible and do this whole I swear to tell the truth. And I had this weird moment when I put my hand on the Bible, and I was like, oh man, you better tell the truth here. And I was like, how odd that I'd be like, you better tell the truth here, because that's kind of supposed to be the way you live all the time, you know what I mean? It would be like, remember today, don't forget to breathe. You know what I mean? It's just a weird... So then, one of my first sermons, they said, we want you to speak about telling the truth. And somehow, I connected that experience with, and I was like, I'm going to do a whole sermon on that feeling of I better tell the truth here, and how that's how you should live your whole life. So I decide, I'm going to try to make the whole church service into a courtroom, and I'll be the bailiff. And I'll hold out, and I'll put people, I'll try to create this thing. It'll be all dramatic, and everybody will be like, whoa. So I went to the local sheriff and asked him if I could borrow his police uniform. Which is not the weird part. The weird part is he said yes. So I borrow this sheriff's outfit that was in a particular Pantone of sewage brown. It was somewhere between putty and ecru, maybe, I'm not sure what it was. And it was in that sand knit material that they made baseball jerseys out of in the 80s. This just chafe like you wouldn't believe. And so I put on this ill-fitting, chafing, sandpaper polyester outfit, and there's a big holster belt, and It's just heavy and awful, and I go up, and I'm probably like 26. I've done this like 4 times. And I do this whole sermon, and I try to recreate the whole experience, and I'm like walking around in the sheriff's outfit, and I'm like going for it. Imagine your whole life is lived. Everything. Now, the unique feature of this particular church service was at the end of the sermon, they handed out these little pieces of paper, and anybody could write any question they wanted. And then they would tear off this piece of paper and hand it into the middle aisle, and then ushers would come, collect the stacks of paper, and carry them right up to the person who had just given the talk. So you as a viewer could see all the things collected, and then the piece of paper, the stack, handed to the person, and then you would take the first one and you would just answer them. But everybody knew that you didn't have any chance to sort them. So if you were like, this one is, I can't quite read the handwriting there, they just know that you were just like faking it. Like it's just there. So I finished the sermon, I'm like, that was seriously, I threw it down on that one. This is gonna be awesome. I take the stack. First question. So why are you wearing a police uniform? And I'll never forget, my whole body goes numb. And but it wasn't that, there was that terror. Oh my word, this person didn't get any of it. But it was almost like 2 punches. It was like from the first punch, which was, oh my word, this person didn't get any of it. Followed quickly by, you could imagine, the haunting tsunami of terror of, was this person the only one? Or is this question reflective of a larger cloud of ambiguity that everybody is sitting under except for me, which I am now under? Just brutal. So, failure is good. I don't know if that's about it. I just stopped right there. Actually, failure makes the best stories, usually. Like you're at a dinner party, and someone's like, I was pretty awesome right away. And then I tried more stuff, and it all just came naturally. Then I tried some new stuff I'd never been before, and it was like everything I tried, it was almost like effortless how quickly the success came. You don't like this person's stories. You don't even like them. But you're at a story, and Carol is like, I fell down a flight of stairs on a bicycle wearing roller skates. I landed in the mud. Then we had to file Chapter 11 right after the hurricane in which we had to walk uphill both ways. You're like, I like Carol. Carol's on my team. Everybody's too afraid of failure. Everybody's too afraid. Everybody's too afraid. What if it doesn't work out? Lots of things aren't going to work out. At least try something you love. At least create a life that's worth creating. It's going to be difficult. You might as well be doing something that gets you up in the morning. You might as well be doing something that you think, all right, let's see where this takes us. Okay, so we can do questions. We can do whatever you want. How much time do we have, by the way?
20 minutes.
20 minutes? Time.
The schedule says, I don't know what you.
Well, I think we'll just have to decide what the schedule says. Yes, front row.
So,
I'll repeat the question if it's good.
I just finished 2 years of community college.
You just finished 2 years of community college.
Yeah, and just kind of looking back on it, talking to some friends, it's kind of crazy to think that 2 years just flew by, and kind of wondering if I took advantage of all the opportunities there. So as I'm going to do 2 more years of college at a university, I guess what advice would you have to...
You're going to go do 2 years at a university. How old are you?
27.
You're 27. Good Lord, you're so young. I would say that calling is overrated and curiosity is underrated.
Okay.
So I would begin with, what are you curious about? Because probably where you go with your life, curiosity will rarely let you down. What is that which you think, I would love to... That. Because Abraham Joshua Heschel said, I didn't ask for success, I asked for wonder. So what vision of your life do you think, oh my word, that would be amazing? And then go after that. So what do you need to study? What do you need to expose yourself to? What do you need to absorb? What do you need to inhale? That there's always the chance you might stumble into something where you think, oh, I could give myself to this. and you're 27, you're at university. I would take the widest range of things and see, is there something in here that lights something up within you? And then I would pursue it. And anybody who says you can't have a career in that, or that doesn't pay well, just say to them, well, I just actually rather be alive. And if you can't make any money at it, then you can do it, and Starbucks benefits are better anyway. For all the Russian lit majors. Yes, hi, back row. What's your name?
And your major does not determine the rest of your life. Right?
Absolutely true, and that was a fascinating question. In an outside voice. Yes. Hi.
Hi,
What's your name?
Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi. I was listening to your podcast while I was driving here, so it's very strange to see you, having had you speak in my car. That was maybe not a good choice.
You were listening to me talk on the way here, and now I'm here talking. And it's
Exactly.
just- yeah.
Yeah, too much.
Too much. Thank you. Yes.
Having reached a point in your career where people will come to listen to you speak and allow you to speak, do you find that success has changed your creative process at all?
Great question. There's like 3 questions in there. I actually never saw it as a career.
Repeat the question.
The question was, has success at this point in my career affected the creative process? I never saw it as a career. I've never actually used that word because it was actually had this sort of strange childlike, there's this thing that I have to do. I have to make this, or I'll spontaneously combust like the drummer in Spinal Tap. There was some odd, every time I veered from the next thing I need to make, and it became something else, it always goes off the rails. But there's always several things where I need to make these. Book, podcast, film, show, tour, whatever it is. That's the only way it's ever worked. So anytime I tried to do like strategy, or like what's the 5-year plan, or even thought that way. I remember one publisher, my first publisher, was like, we're going to have a meeting about your brand. And I was like, I'm so bored, I'm not even going to come to a meeting about my brand. I don't even know what that is, or what you would even, you know what I mean? So it never felt like a career. It felt like I just have to make this stuff, and everything that I've made is like, oh, it's out. Good. And the fact that somebody would be moved by it, or it would help somebody, I don't even know. There's this line in the book of Ephesians in the New Testament, grace upon grace. It was so meaningful to get to make it, that the fact that it would help or touch or move somebody or inspire them, I don't even have language for it. It's like, literally when I came here and you all, well, there was like a line when I came in here, I was like, no way. I literally was like, I wonder who they're here to hear. I don't. So the process is, in many ways, it's the same. I wake up and try to make the next thing. I'm more in awe that you can have an idea and actually work to where it comes out. I'm more in awe of that, like magic, whatever that is. I'm probably I can get to things quicker than I used to. So I just did a new one-man show at this comedy club in LA. Tuesday night, I debuted this new show, which was 82 photos I've taken on my iPhone. But I probably started with over 100 and had to like whittle it down. So like there's just like a hard skill of 10,000 hours. It would have taken me months to whittle down those 100 and then to arrange them, because there's like an information architecture that went in. Or my book, What We Talk About God, was 600 3x5 cards that I had to lay out on the living room floor and then keep looking for patterns and arrange until I had the flow of the book. That was like 600 things you're trying to keep up here. So I probably enjoy the process more than I used to, because I used to have whatever percentage of head games. You're no good. Nobody. And then at some point I realized, see, the thing about fear is fear has generally one line of dialogue, which is no. Fear is the character who comes into the play, no matter where the plot is, and goes, no. And the other thing, and the thing that fear wants to say the most is fear generally just says to you, you know what, this could really bomb. That's what fear says, you know, you could really fail. And once I learned that you can talk back to fear, and now when fear talks to me, which is all the time, and says, you know what, this could really bomb. Standing back here, coming in here, realizing, what are you in, like a geology classroom in a community college on a Saturday morning? This could really bomb. When fear does that, like, this could really bomb. Now I know enough to say to fear, I know. And then I smile. Because fear is really powerful, but not very smart. And fear doesn't know what to do with that. When, you know what, people might not like this. I know. Fear's like, I don't know what to say to that. Because yeah, but I'm way more in awe than I used to be. And I'm way more trusting with whatever the idea is. Just make it. So I spend almost zero energy trying to explain to people the thing before it's made, or trying to justify it or defend it. All that energy, because you're the steward of your own energies, all that energy could be used to actually make it. Anybody know a friend who's been writing a book, and talking about writing the book is how they avoid actually writing the book? So I'm much more aware. Just quietly go about making the next thing. Yeah, and I'm more enthralled and interested in the creative process. It's like the interviews on my podcast. A lot of them are just, there's always some sort of, how did you end up here? How did you make this? How did that work? Because I think it's just riveting. Yes.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
I got really excited when I heard that you might be able to write a book by having somebody follow you around and either record or draw what you were
So
saying.
you might be able to just speak a book.
Oh, I know. I
Yes.
was thinking, yes, I'm loving this. And then I was so upset when you said you actually had to write.
Oh, you were upset when I said if you're going to write a book, you have to actually write a book.
Yeah.
Although, okay,
So I just wondered if you had a couple of tips for
Yes,
those who might be in that place.
yes. First off, you have to make it how you would make it. And some people sit there like me and type it out word for word, day after day. Some people do speak a book. And that's how they write their books, and their books are fantastic. So some people get somebody who actually loves to write and is a great writer. I have friends who are great writers who have no ideas. And they're literally like, I would love somebody who had a bunch of ideas and they could speak them to me and I'll shape it. And there's no shame in that whatsoever. So part of the thing is, or like Damien Hirst, the British artist, whose stuff goes for millions and millions and millions of dollars. He has like a whole workshop of artists. Paint red dogs today. They paint red dogs. So don't let one person's method, if you're like, I have a book in me, but I need to speak it, but I need somebody, in some ways what you do is paint a picture of who that person is. I need a really good writer who could, where would they sit? Where would they type? Okay, we would sit at this park. We would sit at this place in my house. We would go to that place. Picture the person and what you would need them to do. You have the plot points. You have the 7 steps to financial freedom. Whatever it is that you have. And then picture how you do it. I would pace back and forth. I would sit in my favorite porch chair and I would just speak it. And then those people, here's the beautiful thing for you. Those people actually exist. And they're actually affordable. You know what I mean? It's you honing the idea so that when you get that set up, you actually know what you're going for. Yeah, so don't listen to me. Yes?
So when you're creating your own life, I guess maybe it's a problem that idealism gets in the way, but how do you deal with like competing values? It's like right now I can make some choices that lead to kind of more rewarding, wonderful work that I love, or more community, living close to people who I love, or kind of more adventure. And all of those things are really attractive. So how do you choose kind of your competing values?
I don't see them as competing. It's part of it is to move from a binary or a trinary, which is this is against this, move to a more, they would call it non-dual awareness. These are all things that matter to me. So I would just begin what does a life look like that has all of those present? So I don't necessarily think that they're competing. And maybe you have 2 out of 3. And it's important to think about things in terms of seasons. We are so deeply cut off from the seasons because, well, there's all this interesting research on how with the invention of electricity, people slept less. Because generally, pre-electricity, when the sun goes down, it was like, oh, it's dark. Probably should go to bed. And then when the sun rises, it was like, oh, the universe is waking us up. So you can see, your ancestors had much more of a sense of, it's dark, we go to bed. It's light, we wake up. And then foods were in season or not in season. But right now in Des Moines, Iowa, in February at 2 a.m., you can get tomatoes. It doesn't matter where they were grown or whether they were in season or not. You can live completely outside of any sense of seasons. So I think what's interesting is with the birth of the modern age and cement and fluorescent and neon everywhere, you have a loss of an understanding of seasons. So for example, if the sitcom is funny for 5 seasons, they make 7 seasons. How many of you stayed too long somewhere? And now you look back and you realize the moment when you should have left and been like, peace, and you did it. And then there was 18 months of turmoil until you realized what you should have done 18 months. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Because what happens is we're like, it's fine, why would I leave? Oh, no. If you don't leave when it's time to leave, a graduation will become a divorce. So sometimes a season is ending not because it's blown up, but because that season is ending. And we often don't understand the end of a season unless something horrible goes wrong, right? And then I went out of there and I said to them, take this job, instead of, this has been a great run. And now, I'm going to go on to the next season. So when you talk about, like, there are these 3 things that I love, to me it's always important to think about life in terms of seasons. So for this season, we're going to do this. And we're going to live really, really, really skinny and save up as much money as we can. And then at the end of this season, we're going to sell our thing and we're going to travel for a year. And the people around us might not understand, but we know that at the end of that year, we'll have a much more clear vision of, and that's always helped me. Like, this season looks like this. This season right now, I'm traveling, but I like traveling a lot is fun. I leave my family for like a day. I don't like leaving my family, so I'll leave them like for a day. But then there are other seasons where I'm like, nope, we're staying home. So last year, I was home pretty much all the time. So, yeah, I think it's important to remember, okay, this season we'll do this, and then that season will change. Hi, yes?
Hi, Felice.
Felice. How do you spell that, Felice?
F-E-L-I-C-E.
F-E-L-I-C-E.
Yes, as
From
in
the Spanish, Feliz Navidad.
Felice.
Yes.
So,
Hi, Felice. Welcome to the show.
thank you very much. As I was looking over all the different lectures and everything else, and I came upon yours, and I don't know you from before, so I'm kind of probably the only
right here.
person. But I got intrigued by what I saw in terms of how to be here, because I'm older, and I have grandchildren in college, and I'm trying to tell them, they're very busy studying engineering and business, and they've got to make money. It's all about money. And I'm saying, damn it, it's really not. You know, whatever
Right.
happened to liberal arts? Whatever happened to learning about...
Did you say what happened to liberal arts?
I did.
Oh, that makes me Felice.
But my question to you, and I can't convince them, and they'll do what they do, and hopefully they'll make good decisions, but is there a time in one's life where somehow, you know, I've done my career, I've had my children, I now have my grandchildren, so do I stop worrying about how to be here at this point, or is there something I should be worried about maybe that I haven't thought of, or something, I don't know.
Your question is there something I should be worrying about that I'm not? Besides Donald Trump? You know what, Felice? You saying that you are doing your part does not surprise me. Here's what I think about our culture. Traditionally, there was the village elder. There were the village elders. And they're the ones who had been around. A friend of mine's a physical therapist. And he said when he's in India, the most flexible person in the village is the oldest person. In America, when somebody reaches a certain age, America starts with an M, when somebody reaches a particular age, there is this culturally accepted, oh, you're of a certain age, you can now check out, stop handing along your cumulative wisdom, and we have a place that we send you. It's called Florida. So what's fascinating to me is traditionally there was, when you had a thing you were struggling with, you just went down the path to the elder. And she had lived long enough to know, okay, that is something you should actually care about. Okay, that, blow it off, doesn't matter. And the last thing older people were known for is turn that music down or get a haircut. Because that's temporal, passing. And I actually, somebody like you, we need you more in the game than ever. Like your wisdom. Are you married to that dude?
I am.
How long?
30 years.
30 years. Okay. We're in like a lecture hall at a community college on a Saturday morning, and you say that you're married for 30 years, and random strangers applaud. So that tells me that at some cultural level, the two of you are way more inspiring and probably have way more to contribute than you realize. So I immediately began with somebody like you, and the fact that you appear to me to be younger than ever, and you feel great. Yes, I didn't even have to ask that. So when I talk about here and creating a life, I just think you have more to contribute and more to give. So I would probably, if we were chatting one-on-one, I would just start asking you what you love to do, what lights you up, what is the thing that you see that you think someone should do something about that, and you're the someone. And you actually have the time and energy and probably resources to actually tackle stuff.
And she is, and she does.
Yeah.
She's busy all the time.
Right. So in some ways, my book for you, you're probably already intuitively doing a lot of the things. Where my book is putting stuff into language for people who are like, those are brand new ideas. There's a Franciscan priest named Richard Rohr who says, true holiness is never self-conscious. And by that what he means is the people you know who are most generous aren't like, I'm really generous. Every time I think about other people all the time, I can't stop. Because when you're actually generous, you aren't even self-conscious of it because it just flows naturally from your being. But I would just begin with we need you to see yourself as a village elder and to do that and to be in the game more than ever. Because we actually need your wisdom more than ever. Because people are trying to start businesses, they're trying to keep marriages together, and they're trying to be parents and not lose their minds. And somebody who can be like, oh yeah, I dealt with that in 1982, is more needed than ever. Yeah. You're inspiring. Feliz. That's fantastic. Do we have we have to go out? We have to go out. Oh, we're going to go out and sign books. Okay, great. Hey, I'm so glad that you came. That just means the world to me. That's really I'll go out there if you want a book signed. My podcast is the Robcast, because what else would you call it? And we just did our 101st episode. And there we go. Much love.